Oh, and welcome to episode 6 of Asian Battle Royale. If you didn't see the last episode, spoiler alert, the Anti-Aggression Alliance absolutely obliterated China and India's Purple Alliance, which never actually officially had a name because it didn't really have a stated purpose. Now the Anti-Aggression Alliance controls a lot of land and people and is way more powerful than it used to be. And we're actually going to be starting off this video with the Anti-Aggression Alliance because Bangladesh is not doing very well. If you remember in the last war, the main battleground of the war was Bangladesh, and they are just completely war torn, way more so than any other country in the series. And so, when a new rebellion, that's not actually sponsored by India, but is in favor of joining back up with India, comes in Bangladesh's new lands that they acquired in the west, as well as some lands they acquired over here, the Bangladeshi government is just not able to stop it. And this leads the Indian government to directly get involved in this rebellion against the Bangladeshi government. And then, to make things worse, a rebellion amongst Bangladeshis also happens in the main parts of Bangladesh, which quickly seizes the capital, making the entire country basically completely anarchy. And eventually, the two sides will come to a mutual agreement. And India just gained a lot of land from Bangladesh, and Bangladesh completely left the Anti-Aggression Alliance, and they will actually end up pretty shortly thereafter joining the Freedom Alliance because they want insurance against the Anti-Aggression Alliance, who seems like they're about to invade into Bangladesh at any minute now. On the other side of things, China is still feeling very regretful about having lost the war, and they want to at least get something back, so they decide to invade Taiwan, or I guess the Republic of China, because, well, they weren't involved in the AAA, so maybe they'll be able to help with this, or maybe the AAA won't intervene, and so China starts invading into this land, and it's going pretty well for them because the Republic of China doesn't really have any of the armies that China had. However, one small issue is that the Anti-Aggression Alliance is not just going to sit there and do nothing, as Myanmar will start invading into China to basically show China not to do that. Mongolia starts invading south, and China basically gets cut in half because this is desert. There's not really any troops there stopping. Tibet will then rise up in solidarity with the AAA, again hoping to get their independence, but we'll see if it actually happens, as Kazakhstan joins the war, not with the AAA, just on their own side, to basically just hopefully get some land out of it. And China's eventually squeezed out of the West. Meanwhile, the Republic of China has finally been taking some of their land back, as Korea makes a landing, and China is starting to get squeezed out as Beijing is taken, and pretty quickly, China doesn't really have a chance at winning this war, but the Chinese government refuses to surrender, seeing what happened after they surrendered last time, and that just leads to things going even worse for them as they can keep losing and losing and losing, and they don't win this war. And these are the new borders of the war that just went on. The Republic of China is actually pretty large now, but they do not like the Anti-Aggression Alliance. They feel like the Anti-Aggression Alliance took lands that are rightfully Chinese, because even though they're no longer authoritarian, they still are China, and they want all of their land back. Kazakhstan is also continuing to grow. Speaking of which, Kazakhstan will launch what they call a special military operation into Turkmenistan. That is supposed to last 3 days. It ends up lasting like 3 months. But the outcome is all the same because no one tries to help Turkmenistan because they're not good and they end up losing. And Turkmenistan has melted away into Kazakhstan. Georgia has finally been unsuspended from the Freedom Alliance, and Azerbaijan opts to join it, as Asia as a whole is getting a bit more peaceful, a bit more calm. Tensions are starting to loosen. But then the Republic of China decides to join the Freedom Alliance, and that makes tensions start to boil again. The Freedom Alliance and the Anti-Aggression Alliance are starting to come into conflict with each other. And this is very much not helped when a civil war breaks out in Oman that the Freedom Alliance intervenes in on the side of the rebels, and Oman isn't really able to deal with it as their allies just don't do anything to help them. And a new government is established in Oman that is now part of the Freedom Alliance, which makes the Arab Accords and the Freedom Alliance not really like each other, but they didn't really like each other to begin with, so that doesn't change anything. Then an interesting event is going to happen as Tajikistan will begin to face a rebellion in the more disparate parts of their country that they haven't controlled for as long, and eventually this rebellion will start to spread, and this is an Islamic fundamentalist rebellion. And it turns out the leaders of the Taliban who fled to Tajikistan are trying to take over that country and then eventually take over Afghanistan as well. And so you would think Afghanistan would intervene in this, but they really don't want to get in a war with the AAA right now, so they don't. And eventually the new government wins, which means the Taliban is now in charge of Tajikistan, but they opt to stay in the Anti-Aggression Alliance, and somehow the Anti-Aggression Alliance, which is supposed to be for about like peace and freedom, just lets the Taliban into their alliance. And this is going to increase tensions between the Freedom Alliance and the Anti-Aggression Alliance even more. Yet another event that's going to do that is that India is going to attempt to invade into Sri Lanka to take some of their old land back. And the Anti-Aggression Alliance is going to basically all declare war on India because they basically think that that is just objectively a thing that is an act of war. So they're going to start taking these parts of India. And the Freedom Alliance is not going to step in on the side of India. They would never do that. But they're also not going to step in on the side of the Anti-Aggression Alliance, and the Anti-Aggression Alliance is maddened by that, or is angered by that. Meanwhile, India is really actually taking the land from Sri Lanka pretty successfully because Sri Lanka wasn't really defending it well because they couldn't really. And they controversially sign a law within their country that annexes all of this land back into their country officially without just leaving the island of Sri Lanka on their own. And then India declares that the Anti-Aggression Alliance is now like attacking them. Sri Lanka obviously tries to get some of their land back and lands in India, so India decides to just finish the job and invades into the rest of Sri Lanka, officially annexing them as well. And they start invading into Tibet, which is actually Nepal in modern day, but it's part of the country of Tibet. And you might be wondering, like, how does this war increase the tensions so drastically between the Freedom Alliance and the Anti-Aggression Alliance if India isn't going to end up joining or being supported by the Freedom Alliance? And the answer to that is that the Freedom Alliance is going to send troops into Sri Lanka and liberate Sri Lanka, which means they're kind of fighting alongside the AAA, but they liberate Sri Lanka in exchange for Sri Lanka joining their alliance, and so they basically, in the eyes of the Freedom Alliance, just poached an ally. India is not going to do well now that they realize both sides are against them. They're going to play it a little more safe, and eventually they're just going to sue for peace with the Anti-Aggression Alliance. And the Anti-Aggression Alliance is going to be kind of cowardly and just not take any of India's land, which means India just took a bunch of land from Sri Lanka, and that caused Sri Lanka to switch sides. But a few more things still need to happen. First of all, Japan joins the Freedom Alliance. This is seen as a betrayal by Korea, and their relations quickly get, like, pretty much the worst relations between any two countries here. Second of all, Malaysia and Indonesia have done a complete 180 on their relations. So all of the land that used to be part of Indonesia is actually given back. And shortly following that, Laos and Cambodia will decide to unite with each other into Laos, Cambodia. I know, very creative name. And this is where we're going to end the episode. Tensions are at an all-time high, and just when you think things couldn't get any worse, Iran decides to, or Western Iran, which is basically backed by the Arab Accords, decides to invade into Azerbaijan. And this is going to start a war between the Arab Accords and the Freedom Alliance. So wait for that in the next episode. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss it when the next one comes out. Comment down below who you think is going to win this war. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.